Well, it is now my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce a panel that is near and dear to my heart. As I referenced at the very beginning, I've had the great honor and distinct pleasure of working with the dairy industry for the past 4 years. And for those of you who know what dairy is doing in Colorado, and you heard the governor allude to this briefly in his comments earlier today, they're truly creating first-class innovations, whether that be in yielding super milk or products through Fairlife, whether it's robotics in the workforce, the risks reward, how they're monitoring their animals, how they're caring. The strategies and the innovations are truly first-class, and I've had the great honor of seeing it front and center. So we're going to hear from 3 experts to talk about what it is that they're doing in innovation in dairy and how some of those best practices and opportunities could be shared with you, not only on your farms, but also in other agricultural industries. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Cindy Haren. She is the president and CEO of Western Dairy Association. Followed by Mary Kraft. She is the Chief Financial Officer for Badger Creek Farm and Quail Ridge Dairy. Welcome. And finally, last but certainly not least, Cammie Muller. She's the Chief Financial Officer of Aurora Organic Dairy. Welcome, ladies. Yeah, so Mary, maybe you go there, and Cammie, you want to go toward the end? Terrific. So to kick it off, if we can do a little bit of what we've just seen with the spotlights, and just for a moment, Cindy, Mary, and Cammie, just spend 3 to 5 minutes for a second, just contextualizing for us in your sphere of influence what it is that you're doing in innovation, and then we'll do a little Q&A. So Cindy, let's start with you.
Thank you. Could you pull up my first slide back there? So I wanted to just briefly talk about 3 quick things. One is that innovation in dairy has had a real historical past for the past 50 years. And on the top left, I guess, on your side, this graph depicts how dairy cows have improved their productivity over the last 50 years. And what we see is that they have produced an additional 280 pounds per year. And this slide doesn't show everything, but what it does say is there's a direct correlation to the impact of innovation with improved breeding, improved nutrition, improved cow health, adoption of new management practices, and really adoption of new technology. That's really what that slide means. And when you compare that to the world average cow, they're only increasing their yield by about 21 additional pounds. And so the bottom graph, you'll see the United States all the way down to Brazil. What's happening there is the United States is increasing their milk production with fewer cows, and all the other countries, they need fluid milk, but they're increasing their milk production by more cows. And so my point here is that the United States dairy farmers over the last 50 years are using innovation, and it's driving these changes to happen. We can clearly show that our whole dairy community today is using 90% less land, 65% less water, 75% less manure, and they have a 63% smaller carbon footprint than they did back in 1944. So innovation is very important for dairy farmers. Consumers, farming is not familiar to today's consumer, and that really concerns me. But 75% say that they care about sustainable agricultural practices, and 44% of those frequent milk drinkers say that they're interested in environmentally friendly milk. And so the consumer to us is really important. What they think, what they want, how they want it, the type of packaging, that's what we really pay attention to. And as we look at today's family, any of us in food production, we have this image in our head of how we want to sit down at the table with our family, and the reality is, do we have time for that? Only 4% of today's families can really fit that 1950s traditional family model. So when we're innovating, we have to keep that in mind. The other thing that I think is really important for food producers, Americans have increased their expectations of what is good mean when it comes to food. So good. It's no longer enough to simply be nutritious. The baseline expectations for any of our brands, food companies, food, is that environmental stewardship, innovation, and responsiveness to their nutrition needs, that's what good means. The notion of food being good for you, it's changed, and now it's good for all. And that's what our dairy farmers represent. It's about schools, communities, planet, and future generation. That's what today's consumers are about. Could you hit the next slide, please? So why is dairy innovating? I wanted to use this slide as just an example. If you look at this is kind of overwhelming, but this is why innovation has to be adopted by our dairy community. If we look at the beverage landscape, 53 billion gallons are consumed annually. There are 11 billion beverage occasions per week. And you can kind of see the breakout, the percentages of each of those types of drinks, what that means to the consumer and what they're asking for. So next slide, please. So because of the innovation and what the consumer, what's on their mind, the dairy industry created the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, and it's not a bricks and mortar, it's really a think tank. It's a forum to address what are the barriers and opportunities out there. And really the areas that this Innovation Center works in is about health and wellness, science and research, sustainability, animal care, food waste, consumer trends, and new product initiatives. And to date, the Innovation Center has had just thousands of diverse stakeholders in these forums that are really contributing to the conversation and the expertise. So the last point I want to make is about partnerships and why this has been so important for the dairy industry. The Sustainability Council is one piece of that Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy. This is what I call stirring the pot, and I don't mean like smoking pot, okay? We're stirring the pot, okay? And it's stirring the pot of conversation that we're bringing together very diverse people. If you see the logos up there, it's everything from the World Wildlife Fund all the way to the big food companies to dairy farm families, et cetera. So we really wanted everything on the table when we have a discussion. I think that's the only way that you can get to innovation is to have that forum of discussion. A couple of the projects that the Sustainability Council has been involved in is we just completed a life cycle assessment on greenhouse gas. What is the footprint of a gallon of milk? And that was completed and published in about 2009. And we found that the whole dairy value chain, the whole dairy community, is about 2.7% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. And that dairy farms are about 2% of the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. This is some of the fine work that's coming out of the Innovation Center Sustainability Council. Another quick project, last year we partnered with the Governor's Office of Energy, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, I know there were several others, USDA, et cetera, on farm efficiency, farm energy efficiency, and the electric co-ops. And what we found is that there are just little things that can be done on a farm, whether it's lighting, heating, et cetera, that we can tweak and we can make big things happen in cost savings and energy savings. President Obama's cabinet gave us a shout out on that last year, and it was kind of cool because it's in Colorado, so I was pretty proud. So my staff that was doing that, I have staff here, and I'm going to have them stand in a minute too, if that's all right, because I think they're just awesome people. Another project that the Sustainability Council is working on is called Dairy Power, and it's about biogas capture, transports. Last year, you may have heard that the White House released a biogas opportunities roadmap, and it was really highlighting economic and environmental benefits and potential for biogas systems on dairy farms, et cetera. The White House clearly, publicly acknowledged the work of the Sustainability Council and what the U.S. dairy farmers are doing. So that was kind of another proud moment for us as well. 2 other quick projects, Cow of the Future. This one is coming. It's ways to reduce methane emissions through dairy cow nutrition, genetics, and health. Dairy Plant Smart is about the dairy plant, and it's working with plant managers. And then this year, it'll probably take us this year and next, but we're doing a life cycle assessment on water of what is that footprint of a gallon of milk across the whole value chain. So look forward to that. Any information that you would like, it's on usdairy.com. It's a great site. So with that, Alexis, I think that's it.
Okay. You covered a lot of phenomenal territory.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mary, you have farms with 5,500 Holstein cows. Tell us a little bit about your farm, the types of innovation that you're using to care for your animals and build a first-class farm.
So Cindy was talking a lot about the innovation that we're able to use once we've made the product. I'm going to talk about the innovations that we have on our farm as we're developing the ingredients that go in our product. So if you wouldn't mind my slide. This is our dairy barn where we put all of our milk and chill it. You know that milk comes out of a cow at 101 degrees. That's her normal body temperature. Because of some of the technologies that we have, we can take that milk from a cow, and in less than 5 minutes, we have it from 101 degrees down to 38. Okay? All we're doing is we're pumping water that we were going to pump anyway out to water the cows or to clean the barns or any of those sorts of things. And we're able to use that to reduce the energy that we're actually taking to cool that milk. What's beautiful for the consumer is that you get a high quality product immediately, because while milk is the perfect product for all of us, it's also the perfect product for a bacteria. So the quicker you can get it cold, the faster it moves into the pipeline, and the better the quality is all the way around. These tanks happen to be developed with a load cell technology. They know when they're full, and they will send an email to our cooperative who hauls off our milk, takes it to the plants where it gets developed into the regular products. And it's able to say, hi, I'm the tank number 4 at Quail Ridge. It's 10:47 on Tuesday. I'm full, come get me. So when you're looking at just-in-time supplies, that's huge, because that's getting off of our farm, it's getting into the marketplace, and it keeps it at that freshest, most opportune place that it can possibly be in the supply chain. Next slide. So this is one of the ways that we're able to keep track of all of our cows. We have 5,500 of them. We do a veterinarian check every Tuesday. We go through every single animal that we have. And the way that we're able to do that is with computerized technology. So our cows are all Bluetoothed. How many of you guys would live without your cell phones? If I told you to leave them at the door, how many of you would have actually come in the room? Right? And now with the technology that we have, we're able to do so much more, and so we're connected in all sorts of ways. Well, we can connect with our cows in every single activity that we do. So you can see where the cows are here at the feed bunk, and they're able to continue eating. They're in their same little group. You know, they're all in cliques, just the same as we were in kindergarten. And they like hanging out with their best buddy, so we never have to disrupt that herd behavior for that animal to move someplace else. So that animal stays happy. She continues to eat. We do whatever we need to. She's never disrupted. Life moves on. I'd also like to point out the feed that's in front of that cow. We do a lot of new technologies with how we're combining old feed ingredients. So in the old days, they would take whole cottonseed. There's a seed inside of there. You've all seen the Monsanto commercials where they have the fibers, and those fibers become the cloth that becomes your shirt. Well, that little seed is left over. A cow, because she has 4 stomachs, is able to eat that. She soaks it like you would soak dishes overnight. She soaks it, then she's able to get into that little nugget of energy. And so we combine that with a whole bunch of other ingredients and put it in front of her into a mixed ration. So you can see the feed that's in front of those cows. My husband is like the Wolfgang Puck. He's out there looking for exactly the right ingredients, and those all get combined back into what the cows get for their salad in front of them every single day. We have a PhD nutritionist who has now got computer programs where they can explode the micronutrients inside that ration that we're proposing for the cow and figure out which things she can actually get to and which things, that it was there but she's not able to access. And so we're getting better quality food going into that cow, and she's able to convert better. So when Cindy was talking about the amount of animals that we have and the amount of milk that we produce, a lot of it has to do with the technology that we're using in terms of how we're feeding those animals. Then we also have the opportunity to combine a lot of other things that are unusual ingredients. So the wet brewer's grain that come from all of those micro and craft beers that we were looking at last night, all of those wet brewer grains come back to us. They're real squishy and they pick up all the fines. And so we can actually sort of rebuild a corn kernel. Some people used it for making ethanol, and so we have some leftover grain from ethanol production. We have some leftovers for making corn hominy, which would have been in your corn flakes. We have some leftovers from making the high fructose corn syrup that's in your soda pop. All of those come back, and we're sort of glue them back together and put them out for a cow. So lots of technologies there. And certainly the genetics of our cows have changed. Because we can measure so many data points on a dairy cow, we're able to see how she performs, how does she convert, what's her longevity, and we want her to have the best quality of life. So we're able to pick really great genetics to have that cow move forward into her next lactation. So we're constantly looking at the cow's health. We've got lots of different monitors on them, and we're able to look for outliers. Anything that's not behaving like we want it to be, we're able to find that cow and actually do something for her. And I don't know if there's a third slide. We were having issues with it. Is there a third slide? Awesome. This is my family. So we're a family farm. A lot of times we sort of get into issues where we're dealing with how do we feed this growing population of people who are out there. And it has to be done by people who have a real tie to the land. I'm a fourth generation dairy farmer. My son is now back on the facility with us. And he's really interested in what we're doing and how we're doing it. And pulling all of those things together makes us be something that's sustainable. That word keeps coming up. Can we sustain this? My joke is we're the second oldest profession on the planet. But you can't have cows that are doing what they're doing if you are not taking really great care of them. And with all the systems that we've got and the dedication of my family and the people in my local community, we have that. And I'd just like to point out that beautiful alfalfa field that's back there behind those cows is what they got for dinner that next day. So it's a beautiful field.
Terrific, thank you, Mary. Okay, Cammie, tell us a little bit about your organic dairy, one of the largest in the country, and walk through some of the manufacturing distribution.
So can we start? I don't know which one was going to come first, so I had two photos. Let's see if they'll come up. Can we go to the cows first, because it all starts with the cows. We'll come back to this one. Perfect. So as Alexis said, we're the leading producer and processor of store-brand organic milk and butter in the U.S. We're based in Colorado. We own crop ground, we have dairy farms, we have a processing plant and a cold storage facility, and we operate out of Colorado and Texas. Over 3/4 of U.S. consumers purchase organic products. Organic is a fast-growing segment of the dairy industry, which is what we're part of. Last year, there were almost 300 million gallons of organic milk sold. 10 years ago, organic milk was less than 2% of total fluid milk sold. Today, it's over 5%. And still growing. We've been dedicated to organic production for 12 years, but our roots in dairy farming go back nearly 40 years. It's a bit counterintuitive to think about the dairy industry as being innovative. I mean, people have been drinking milk for over 7,500 years, so what's new about that? But Aurora, innovation has come in small steps that leads to better things. We take something and we improve it. We borrow from other industries. I'll talk about that in a minute. We've applied technology differently than maybe the way it's been traditionally used. We've done a lot of collaboration with universities to research and to learn. Our farms are much larger than your typical organic farm. Your typical organic farm has about 100 cows, and I can tell you ours are much larger than that. And how did we do that? Well, we married organic production methods with industry technology and industry best practices to be able to produce organic milk at scale to meet a broader consumer need. Animal welfare is a cornerstone of our operations. I can't tell you how important, we call them our girls, are to us. We use technology like Mary to manage herd health and to give cows individual attention. And it's key in organic production especially. We've partnered with Validus, which is associated with Temple Grandin, and it's a great organization to measure the effectiveness of our animal welfare programs, But now we're taking it further. We're actually looking beyond just the biological needs of the cows, but to their emotional needs as well. I know it sounds kind of out there, but it's true that happy, comfortable cows are more productive. And so there's a lot of effort and we put a lot of effort and a lot of resources in cow comfort and cow health and making our cows very happy. We do collaborate with academic institutions, Colorado State, Ohio State, Texas A&M. We do scientific research to prove or disprove, quite frankly, alternate treatments for ailments in cows because antibiotics are prohibited in organic production. So we have to get creative. We have to look in other places. We'll go to the next slide. Or go back. So this is a photo of our warehouse. So in our plant, we have a manufacturing plant where we process finished goods. We have technology that's both from the beer and the soda industry, and I don't know if you see that in many dairy plants, but we've got it in ours. We recently added, and that's what this picture is, a new fully automated cold storage facility. This facility holds 12,000 pallets of product. That's 545 truckloads of milk, and it's here in Colorado. You'll see it just off of I-25 if you're headed north right before you get to Platteville. A system like this isn't new, but I'm not aware of anyone in fluid milk that uses this type of a system. So these innovations, we've extended the shelf life of our product, and we've streamlined our supply chain, and we've ultimately reduced costs, which is important. So at Aurora, innovation has come from our desire to be A, more efficient, to be B, environmentally responsible, and C, and these are not in priority order, by the way, be good to our people and good to our cows. It's unique for a dairy company to be vertically integrated. There really aren't many of us out there. But through this, we feel we better control our supply chain to get the highest quality product into our customers' cartons. The exposure to all parts of the business gives our team really a holistic look at what we do, from farming to animal care to processing to distribution. We can see the whole picture, and it's the sense of the whole which has been really the ground for where innovation has come from, where we've innovated, is that sense of the whole.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's, I want to touch on a couple of things that you guys talked about, and if we can keep the responses a little bit tight since we don't have that much time. One thing that I heard you talk a little bit about, Cindy, is this notion of the importance of involving everyone in the food chain. When you talked a lot about the Innovation Center and a disparate group of partners, I imagine that part of that is knowledge sharing. You know, part of that is consensus building. Part of that is understanding along the lines of the food chain how integral it is to the end consumer, but ultimately how important it is to things like the environment and other issues. So talk to us a little bit about why it's so critical to look at the entire food chain, the entire process, and to have those stakeholders.
So those partnerships, what they bring is, you know, the whole, it's like you're not leaving anything on the table when you're having those discussions. You know, we found that measurement matters, and so we can't find that stuff out unless you have everybody at the table that has a really diverse opinion about it. We really needed that holistic viewpoint. We found that working with diverse partners that there was really also new innovation and new ideas that were coming up. So for example, through some of this work, you mentioned Fairlife milk. That's actually on the grocery shelves right now, but it is a product that it feels like whole milk in your mouth. It has a great taste and a great feel. And I'm not a skim milk, non-fat drinker, I've got to tell you what. It's like I want the full fat. I know the importance of that dairy fat. But this milk has 50% more protein, 30% more calcium, less sugar, and it has a great feel and a great taste. So that was something that came out of the Innovation Center of getting all these people together, including the consumer's point of view. And we're just seeing it go off the shelves.
Well, I can attest because I have 4 kids and I have some hockey players, and they come off the ice and all they're doing is fueling and refueling with Fairlife. It's like all of a sudden it's just the hottest thing in ice rinks all over the Northeast. So I get it. Mary, let's talk about the consumer, because a lot of what you're saying is that the things that you're doing in innovation are part and parcel of how to manage the farm. But a big piece of this is how to demonstrate how that innovation is leading to a product that this end consumer is going to feel good about. So talk to us about how much of your decision making around innovation is driven by that end consumer.
Wow, because my initial response is almost everything is driven about the cow. I'm really interested in how the cow moves through the program. So you have to make sure that you've fed the goose that lays the golden egg. So that's our first response and our most important one. And then we go, okay, so how do you also lay that into the marketplace so you get exactly what it wants? So if you're looking for that freshness, being able to take that milk from cow to cold in 5 minutes, that's huge. If you're looking at the quality of the milk or even the output and the carbon footprint, the better use that you have of the resources that are out there, it leaves more resources for other places. And frankly, it is one of the reasons that some of our operations, farming operations, have gotten relatively large, because you get economies of scale. It's the same as when you drive your car. If 10 of you drove in your car and each of you had a fuel bill for driving your car, sort of no harm, no foul, and it wouldn't cost as much as a bus that ran empty. But if you put 20 people on a bus, it's a much smaller carbon footprint than all of those 20 cars would be, right? So we can kind of do that same math with what happens in the dairy operation, is if I've got them in a place where I can conveniently work with them, and I'm paying attention to their quality of life. If I've got them where I can use economies of scale. When I have a feed truck, I have a really big feed truck. So everybody gets fed on time. Imagine when we have lunch today, if you get to the feed bunk and there isn't any food left, there would be a really loud noise, right? So the same thing is going on with our cows, and we're using a lot of that technology and innovation to make sure that we've got that cow fed on time so we get it out in the right place. By the same virtue, the same thing is happening in our supply chain as we're trying to send that into the consumer and use our resources that we have on our farm the best that we possibly can.
Cammie, as Chief Financial Officer, one of the things I'm curious about is, you know, there's a cost to innovation, and I think sometimes folks fear change, one, but more than anything, they fear the investment that comes with innovation. And sitting from your perch in particular, where you're managing the finances of the operation, talk through a little bit the importance of that investment, and then I would presume that the longer you invest in innovation, the more you have an opportunity to influence the costs of those innovations over time to ideally bring down the cost of innovation. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I think of it in a couple of different ways, and this is how we address it here at Aurora. So a couple things. First of all, some innovation doesn't require any investment at all. It's just rethinking and doing things better and differently. But you do have to set aside funds to invest in innovation. And the return on it is long. But we do set aside dollars for innovation, and we focus some of those dollars on near-term projects and some of those dollars on long-term projects. We've got resources allocated to it. In fact, one of my colleagues, Craig Edwards, is here, and he's tasked with leading this initiative. But it is economically focused. I mean, ultimately, you're innovating to do business smarter, to do it less expensive, so that you can deliver value to the consumer. And so you've got to balance all three. But I really do think you have to set aside some dollars that you just say, there is no near-term ROI on this, and sometimes we're going to win and sometimes we're not. But there's also innovation that doesn't cost anything.
You know, I was just sitting here thinking, listening to you a little bit, and thinking about if I'm someone who's in this room and I'm going to walk away today from what I've learned from 3 maverick, incredible women. How amazing are they? Unbelievable. Yes. Blown away. What I'm sitting here thinking is about best practices and how folks can take away learnings. And when I mean best practices, it took you time to get to where you are today. You've made some mistakes probably. You've invested in some technologies that maybe didn't work. Just in closing, I'd like for each of you, and I'll start with you, Cammie, then Mary, and then Cindy. If you had a morsel of advice in innovation or a lesson learned that you could convey to the crowd, what is it and how can they act upon it? What's that call to action that you would share with them?
I think for one, you have to empower people in the organization to think about innovation. It can't be just from the top. So if you know, no matter what level you are in an organization, you can innovate, you can contribute to innovation. We get ideas from all levels, from our farm workers to our plant, you know, our folks working on the floor of the plant, all the way up through our organization. And I think getting that broad-based input and having everyone have a voice. You know, I mentioned us being integrated. We have a view of the whole, and I think you've got to let those ideas bubble up from the bottom.
Excellent point.
So about 20 years ago, we started in a peer tour group. Happened to be a whole bunch of dairy farmers, and we would go and we'd prowl around each other's dairy farm. And the deal is, people would come to your place, and you had to let them look under the sheets, and they got to see everything, and they could ask questions about it. And we just kept evolving that group and developed a really good think tank amongst ourselves. But we also got to go see other people's innovation. One of the ones that we saw in Washington State is they have vacuum trucks for poo. Okay, we don't have that in Colorado. Total innovation. So there hadn't been any by time when we went to look at that sort of thing. And so it was a paradigm shift, big paradigm shift. And any opportunity that you have to get out of your office, out of your lab, out of whatever your think tank is, and go see other people do what they do, that is the best way that you can innovate and build stuff. We call it R&D. You all know what R&D is? Anybody who's heard me before knows what this is. Research and development, right? But we don't think of it that way. We call it rob and duplicate. And I am giving you all license to rob and duplicate within the industries and go across borders of those industries. Because a lot of times there's other people who have really great things that are out there. You just need to go see them.
I love it. I'm going to remember that. Rob and duplicate. Cindy.
You know, working with diverse partnerships and trying to get all this diverse conversation, what I would say is measure what matters. You know, bring the science together and then leverage it. A lot of times we get our thoughts together and it's like, oh, this is a great idea, this great idea, you get 100 ideas. But we really need to go after what is it that, in this case, dairy farmers, what do they really need? What matters to them? What's relevant? So measure what matters and then really leverage the science and the innovation and keep that collaboration going.
Fabulous. Well, can I just say in closing that as a partner to 38 million kids across the country, I would just advocate for the notion that we find ways for more of our students in schools to see what you're doing in action, because they need to understand not only where their food comes from, but they need to understand where innovation starts. And the three of you are master innovators, so thank you so much.